We're gonna get started. Everybody ready?
Yeah.
Y'all ready? All right, all right.
Yes, it's the meeting.
All right, here we go.
Yeah.
The public work session of the Board of Education for February 21st, 2024 is called to order. This meeting is being streamed live and will be available for viewing on the PPS Board of Education YouTube channel. Good evening, everyone. Tonight we have a work sessions with Human Capital Enterprises to kick off the planning of the superintendent search process. So to start off tonight, we're going to start with a round of introductions in the room, and then we'll hand over to Hank to lead tonight's discussion. And we will start to my far right, go to the left, and then we'll hit those that's online.
Terry Proctor, Communications Department.
Yeah, you're next.
Julia Brim-Edwards, board member. Christy Perry, Human Capital.
Hank Harris, Human Capital.
Gary Hollins, board member.
Herman Green, board member.
Oh, moving too fast, I'm still eating.
Okay, go a little slower. Gary Hollins.
Eddie Wong, board member.
Andrew Scott, board member.
Sharon Reese, Chief of HR.
Dude, I say board member.
we all board members.
We all board members.
Liz Lodge, contracted general counsel. Roseanne Powell, board manager.
The problem with this title don't come with a paycheck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to know.
Do we want to introduce? Want to introduce my friend over there?
First place.
Just say your name and what school you go to. All right. All right, we'll start. Whoever is online, I can't see. Okay, we'll start with Director DePass, and then we'll go to, you guys can pick somebody to hand it off to.
Sure. So I think Patty's online too, but hi everyone, I'm Michelle DePass. I'm on the board and I'm going to be camera off, and I'm also going to leave a little bit early. So I'll sign off at about 5:45. But nice to see everyone.
You're passing it to?
Who you passing it to? Go ahead, Patty.
Oh, I didn't hear. This Patty Sullivan, board member, and I will pass it to Kara.
Hi, Kara Bradshaw, executive assistant, and I'll pass it to Steve.
Steve Webb, Human Capital, and I'll pass it off to Hector.
Good evening. I'm Hector Garcia from Human Capital, and I'll pass it to Tammy.
Tammy Campbell, Human Capital. And I don't think I have anyone to...
Frankie.
Hi, I'm Frankie Silverstein. I'm the student representative.
All right, thank you, everyone. So this discussion will be based off what Hank talked about. What Hank is going to present, kind of the plan, how we want to move forward as a board, and we'll go from there.
Right.
Thank you
so much, Chair. Thank you, and thank you, board. This is our first opportunity to be with you after you selected us for this very significant honor and this very significant moment in time in Portland Public Schools. So on behalf of my team, Christy, Tammy, Hector, Steve, and others who are not with us tonight, who are working in the back, Kathleen and Jay and Robin, we thank you for this, and we look forward to partnering with you and helping you in this transition, find an excellent new superintendent of schools. What I'd like to propose that we do tonight is three things. One is I'd like to go over what does a typical human capital enterprises search process look like? Not the Portland Public specific one, but in general, what does it look like when we run a search? And I think that will be a good way to sort of start some conversations about what it should look like in Portland. And so we'll do that. Hector's going to help me. We'll go through some slides and talk about what it looks like. And then we're going to move to, I'd like to next go into, ask Christy to lead some conversation around the engagement work. And the engagement work is the very first thing that really we have to take on after tonight. Engagement takes some time to plan and some time to execute. And so even though we won't have created a design tonight, it's worthwhile to move into the engagement sooner rather than later. we're here in February. We want to make sure that we're engaging with your community. So I'll won't say anything more on that, except Christy will talk about that a bit later. And thirdly, we want to engage in a conversation and maybe facilitate a conversation. We've heard the board talk about the notion of a committee of the whole, meaning the entire board doing pieces of work, and the notion that maybe there should be some work groups consisting of some members of the board doing bodies of work. And so Steve and Tammy are going to facilitate that conversation. We will stay no later than 7 p.m. this evening. That's our plan. Is that
Oh, right, you're on the clock.
Is that all right?
You're on the clock.
Okay, we're on the clock. All right. Hold these may or may not work. We're hoping they do. We can come back to this. But if so, we would like to begin the engagement work next Tuesday, which is February 27th. And we would like to come back and do a continuation of the planning meeting, the second planning meeting, on Tuesday, March 5th. Let's come back to that and see if that's doable. But right now, that would be our proposal. If those dates don't work, then somewhere in that vicinity should work.
We got a board meeting that night.
We have a special, it's a off meeting.
So let's come back to that.
Yeah, we can come back to
maybe
the-
there's a way to do that. Maybe it's
We can
another
come back
day.
to the timeline
Yeah.
and stuff.
But in general, I want you seeing kind of in general where we see it going over the next couple of weeks. I think I might have uploaded this photo at the moment you sold the building last night, but it's a great photo anyway.
We didn't sell the building. Stop saying that.
The name will still be there though. So that the name
Did I
will still be
misspeak?
there.
I don't want to misspeak this.
Like, you guys sold the building.
At some point, this will be a nostalgic.
Oh, and we're
We emotionally sold the building.
Okay.
and we're moving downtown.
All from last night.
Do we want to take a moment in the public space to clarify? Because I certainly misread that article.
You brought it up.
No, we have not sold the building.
Thank you.
Nor have we committed to moving downtown.
It's
We
been
have-
corrected.
We have
There were
simply
a few
done a due
inaccuracies,
diligence
yeah.
process that we are going to look at what is out there and what we could be doing. That is all we have done. So for anyone watching,
Thank you.
that is all we have done. Thank you, Hank, for allowing us the
Yes,
opportunity
that was the plan.
to get that out to the general public.
Thank
This
you,
was a
sir.
setup, in case you didn't know.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Can I just offer that at some point we'll look at this image and we'll feel a little bit of nostalgia?
I don't know. I don't know.
We might. I'm feeling it. Keep the picture.
Okay. So again, the next slides are about I want you to think generically. This is what we typically do in our searches. And later we're going to move into specifically what would it look like in Portland Public? What could it look like in Portland Public? I'm going to turn over to my colleague Hector, who's going to talk about what does focus group and engagement typically look like. Hector, take it away.
All right. Good evening, board members. I'm happy to join you from the Windy City here in Chicago. This first stage of the process will help bring together various voices that will help develop the next superintendent criteria. That's what this initial stage does. As you can tell, we spend time with various individuals in order to really get to know the school district and hear about what makes the district great, what's challenging, and what are their aspirations for the district. On the next slide, we'll reach out to a broader group of community members through our survey in English or Spanish. We'll obviously work with the district if other languages are needed, since they'll know the community better, and we'll be able to know how to prioritize and really reach out to them well. So those are the two stages early on that we'll start.
Great. Thanks so much, Hector. So as Hector described, we do engagements, which we do focus groups, and we do one-on-ones with board members, and we meet with a number of constituents, whether they're staff, families, parents, community members, and we also reach out through a survey. And that last bullet point, I'll just say, we often get asked, and I assume that it will be important in Portland Public Schools to think about, how do we reach folks who aren't the ones who are going to fill out online surveys, right? How do we do that? And we've got some strategies, but the folks who actually usually have the best strategies are the folks who are working in your departments that are engaged in outreach to communities. And so we would work with them to think about how do we do that most effectively and to hear and to elevate voices that are not always elevated.
Question, what is the purpose of the surveys?
So great question. So both the survey and the focus group have two objectives. One is to school us up on Portland Public Schools. We don't live in this district. We don't come to work here every single day. We don't send our kids to PPS. We all have some connection, but it's not nearly as deep as what you board members and folks who come and work and live Portland Public Schools every day. So part of it is for our team to learn the district well enough that we can represent you well when we go out to recruit. And the second piece, I think this brings me to my next slide, Chair Hollins. Yes, the second piece, the second outcome of why do we do that survey and why do we have the focus groups is we're going to come back to you, board, at some point in the near future with a document that we call the next superintendent criteria. And we're going to say to you, board, this is what we've learned from your community. This is what we're hearing from your community. This is what we think your community wants you to focus on in terms of the profile of the next leader. That document often has some leadership qualities that are in the, we often call them soft skills. I don't think that's the right word, but they're the skills that are about how you lead, how you engage with people. Are you a great communicator? Are you visible in the schools? Are you great with finances? We get some of that, and we also get some that's more the resume stuff. Some folks are going to be really wanting you to focus on somebody who's been a superintendent before. Others are going to say, that might not be so important, but they really need to love Oregon or the Northwest because we don't want the rain to scare them away. And I don't mean that flippantly. We hear that. We hear that when we do searches in this part of the country. So it's a combination of kind of the qualities that you would see or experience when you engaged with somebody who you worked with, and the qualities or experiences that you would see on a resume when you applied. Christy, anything you would add to that?
No, it also, well, yes, a little bit serves as a roadmap for you to even think about what interview questions you ask. So the things you hear in the survey will be presented to you first as themes and then as the profile, as I've seen it done. And then it helps you as the board to know how are you, because you're representing a community. And so you're going to take those themes, you're going to take that ideal profile, and then after you adopt it, then you go into the interview process. And you can use what you learned from your community meetings that we present to you in order to structure the next part of the process. It might feed into what sort of a on-demand task you ask candidates to do. It might feed into interview questions.
Yeah.
But it kind of guides your next step of the work.
So this is a slightly pedantic point, but one I think is important is distinguishing between the engagement we're doing with different folks is going to, we should be clear about what we're getting. So engagement with board members, like we know what we want in a superintendent. Engaging with senior staff, they know what they want in a superintendent. Engaging with the broader community, most of them have never met the superintendent. They know what they want from the school district. And that's an important distinction. And it's important for us to hear what they want from the school district because our superintendent search is for a superintendent who will take the school district in that direction. But I don't want to misread what we're hearing from them because that's what they want in a superintendent if they've never met.
You're 100% right.
Yeah.
You're 100% right.
So just playing off of that, so I was thinking this along the same line. So like, we want somebody who's going to help us achieve our board goals. And my guess is 98% of our families may not know exactly what those board goals are. So I wonder if as part of like the framing that they're going to be acquainted with what the expectation of what the superintendent's going to accomplish. They can add their things in, but also I guess maybe one of the things I worry about, we ask an open question. And I think it's going to probably end up being things like communication. I mean, things that they can see as somebody who is a superintendent person who's going to interact. And then all of a sudden we hire somebody who's going to actually has a track record of being able to meet our goals and be like, they didn't listen to us because we said X and they went with Y. So I'm wondering if there's like in the process of doing that, there's also a like here's where the district is heading, and we're interested, you're part of the system, like what you see, how the superintendent facilitates that.
So those are all great points. And remember, we're looking at kind of how the general template looks like. But I will say this to you, and these are spot on points. I mean, you're absolutely right in terms of the caliber, I don't want to say caliber, the quality of insight that a senior staff member has about the operation and a board member is quite different than what somebody has who loves their school deeply and loves their district deeply, but has a different lens on it, right? However, I would say that in the multitude of voices that come through, we learn a great deal that's really important about Portland Public Schools. The questions that we ask in the focus groups and in the surveys they're basically the same, and I'm going to distill them down. They're what's great, what's working really well in Portland Public, what are the challenges and the complexities that the new superintendent is going to face, and what would you, meaning you non-board person that we're engaging with at this moment, what would you be looking for in the superintendent if you were hiring them? And you're spot on that many people who don't work with the superintendent every day have a lens on what that job is, which may or may not actually reflect what their actual work is. But the general themes from large groups of people, particularly important to what we hear from board members, because you are the decision makers. And we're very clear with everybody that we engage with that the ultimate decision resides with these 7 individuals.
Michelle, that's a question.
Thank you. Director DePass?
Yes, I had a comment that building on what Director Brum Edwards said and Julia, and I think it's really important to let the community know why we're seeking their input and what impact it will have. And what I know from working in community engagement field in Portland is people want to be engaged. And they also want to be told very clearly how their input will be used. And I think depending on the sample size, which will be big, we'll have lots of people that will fill the survey out. It gives us an opportunity to start to source themes. Even though they don't understand the work of the superintendent, I still think, as you mentioned, it would be good to hear from people about the strengths of the district and the challenges, and important to hear from them. And then you start to theme those you start to see themes, and I think those themes will be really important for us in our selection process.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Bass.
But also being very clear about, you aren't making the decision. The board makes the decision, and we're looking for input that will help inform the process.
Yeah. So let me go through that slide and just sort of clarify where that criteria piece lands in the process. So we've engaged in focus groups, we've engaged in one-on-ones with board members, we've collected data from your surveys. We will present a first draft to you. This will be over 2 meetings, because you'll see a first draft first, you'll review it in public session, you'll comment in it, then there'll be a second meeting where public comment is invited. And we'll adopt that next superintendent, you'll adopt, I should say, the next superintendent criteria. And as Christy said, that's really kind of your marching orders to you giving us our marching orders for what we're looking for. That document does live throughout the search. It is, in fact, as you said, Christy, what we build interview questions off of. We'll work to hold each other accountable, because it's possible that a candidate comes in who's so charming that you fall in love with them and you forget the next superintendent criteria document because they're just so magnetic, right? And so we want to bring ourselves back to this document as the guidepost of what we're looking for. I'm going to say we, it's you. I am your humble servant, but at the table, we'll look at this together, and you'll look for candidates through the lens of this. Once that criteria document is adopted by you, we begin the recruitment process. In a typical search that starts earlier in the year. Now I'm jumping ahead of myself. I'll get to that in the next slide. So recruitment happens once the position is live, it's posted. There's a place to go on our website that says apply to be the superintendent of schools. How do we find your great candidates? We talked a little bit about this when we did our pre-meeting with you when you were interviewing multiple firms. We engage our network and our network of networks. And everybody sitting at the table and online is our network now. We'll be asking you when we meet with you, is there somebody that you might get excited about if you saw them apply? We'll ask that we ask that in the survey, we ask that in the focus groups, and folks give all sorts of names, and some of them materialize to be actually viable contenders, and some don't, and that's okay. That's the work of engaging networks, and we also have a broad network from outside of PPS that we use as well. That's that slide. So during that period of time, we're going to be kind of quiet. You're not going to see a lot of us. We're not going to have regular weekly meetings during the recruitment process. That's because our sleeves are rolled up, and we're trying to find great candidates who want to engage in this remarkable opportunity here in Portland. I do want to talk about the board's role in the recruitment process, which is pretty much close to nothing.
Say that again.
What's that?
Say that again.
It's pretty much close to nothing in the recruitment process, and here's why. We want to create a process that is absolutely fair to anybody out there who wants to come to Portland Public Schools. It's important that somebody who lives across the country, who might meet the profile, who has always dreamed of living in Portland, has the same access to information that somebody who lives right here in Portland and knows board members by first name. And so what we ask board members, I'm going to ask for a nod, that you not, when somebody calls you and says, Christy Perry, when somebody calls you and says, when Christy Perry calls and says, can I have lunch with you? I'm really excited about Portland Public Schools. I really want to get your sense of it. When she calls you and says, can we do that? Your answer is no. I'm so glad to know that you're interested, but here's Hank Harris and team's email. Please reach out to them. That's our search firm. There will be people who will also lobby you. That's what I was going for. There will be people who will say, let me tell you why Christy Perry is the right candidate for Portland Public Schools. You should not engage in those phone calls with them. You should refer that person to us. We are here as your recruitment firm, and that's what we do. We engage with candidates, we engage with prospects, we engage with, you'll see the term lobbyist in quotes, folks who are really strongly advocating for a person, and as they should, right? If you're in the community and you know somebody and you think that person would be great, you should have a way to have your voice heard, but the proper way is to come to the search firm. And there will be lobbyists, anti-lobbyists too, right? There'll be the people who call you and say, whatever you do, don't hire this person. And those folks should also be referred to the firm. Chair?
Oh, you asked me for a nod?
I thought you had something to say.
Oh, no, go ahead.
But I need unanimity from the board that you're good with that.
Only if they're not paying for lunch.
Gary, did you say, are you paying for lunch?
No, I said as long as they're not paying for lunch. If I got to pay for lunch, then I'm not going to meet with nobody. But if they're paying, I might think twice about that.
Absolutely. That was similar to my comment, kind of opposite though. But yeah, I think that's a great process. I appreciate it.
So question, I already nodded, so this is not a predicated.
Yeah.
Not done.
So we all agree to that, but we're not going to have the sort of profile yet. But like we already got calls.
Us too.
Yeah. So will we starting tomorrow have posted somewhere? I mean, it seems like it would be helpful to have on the website, send people straight to you, because otherwise they'll look like I'm going to call the board if I don't know where to call. So it seems like putting it up there and then giving all of us where you want.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that's a great question and easily doable. On our website, PPS already exists. It says information forthcoming, and it says for further information, email. I forget which names are in there, but at least a couple of us. So if people go to our website, they'll already see PPS. It might make sense for PPS's website to have something sooner rather than later with that information. We can easily do
We have a
that.
section on the page for the search. So
Yeah.
that seems like that then.
Their page.
We certainly will have a presence on your website. We don't always do it the first day, but we can certainly do that, Julia.
Yeah, I mean, it's for people.
Provide a
understand. Yeah, just a hyperlink to there.
Yeah, so if we've already been given a name, we just would pass it to you during the engagement process, right?
So I assume all of you have gotten names, and we have gotten names, and we've gotten calls, and all of that. So if you have some names, you can do that when we meet you in your one-on-one. You can email that to us ahead of time. Whenever you want to do that, that's fine. We would love to be the collector of names. We'll also ask you in your one-on-ones if there's names of people that you're excited about. I mean, you don't have, you're also allowed to tell us if there's people out there that you think are great. There's nothing wrong with that. Are we good? Are we good on that?
Yeah.
I guess so.
Yes, yes.
I am, because I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to get the lunch and then at the lunch say this is who you should go through. Right after I get the lunch paid for.
Under $50.
Under $50.
Once a year.
Oh man,
This is
Is
tough.
that 50 each?
This is tough. There's not too many
Herman-
places I'm gonna be able to go.
Herman, I'll take you out to lunch.
Okay.
There we go.
I guess this is out.
Again, recognizing that we're talking
good.
right now, we're largely talking about in general what a search looks like. I want to point that this is. I want to share how we do searches that happen in the spring, and we're going to call this a spring search. In a typical search, if we were starting this in October, the recruitment process would begin after the adoption of a next superintendent criteria. That would be the logical sequence, right? You've got the criteria, now let's recruit. In this particular part of the year, when time is not, we don't have quite as much time before July 1 as a search that starts in October, we're going to recommend that your recruitment window actually opens before you have your next superintendent criteria. So I see some nodding, right? So that there's a logic to that. But at the same time, a candidate ought to know what that next superintendent criteria is before they finalize their application. So we'll want to kind of stagger that. We'd like to open, well, again, staying into the generic, we would recommend that we open the window, we then complete the next superintendent criteria, and then there's still some period of time where the window is still open, where people can put in their applications or maybe withdraw their applications because they don't like what the criteria said, whatever. But I see some nodding, so I think I'm making some sense. This is what happens in a typical human capital enterprises search firm when the window closes. Window closes meaning we're no longer accepting applications. This is what happens. In a typical search, our team reviews all the applications. In the purple, it says, let's imagine there's 25 applicants for Portland Public Schools superintendent. Our firm, using your next superintendent criteria, identifies, these are hypothetical numbers. We don't know what the actual numbers will be. Let's say our team says, you know what, there are 10, and we're going to review all the applications. There are 10 of these candidates that we think are most closely aligned to the next superintendent criteria. These impressive candidates are worthy of spending more time on. Our team will do an initial screening, which is an actual interview where we'll do a virtual interview and we'll transcribe that interview. And we'll also do a single telephone reference call, just one, on the top candidates. And we only do one because it's early in the process. That candidate doesn't want 15 people to be called early in the process. So we do a single reference call and an initial screening interview. In a typical search, the board members, and only the board members, have access to all that material. So there'll come a day when I'll say, board, I'm sending you out a link to all the application materials. You're gonna see all 25, in a typical search, you're gonna see all 25 applicants. You're gonna see the 10 that we've moved sort of our top tier. You're going to see the transcripts of the interviews and the reference calls of those 10 candidates. And you're going to review them on your own time. And you're going to come to a meeting that we call the slate meeting. The slate meeting is an executive session meeting, only board members, no staff. And you'll have come reading the applications. Now, I just want to go back up the slide if I can. In a typical search that has 25 applicants and 10 top candidates, some board members will say, I want to read all 25. I like this firm, but I still want to make sure they didn't miss somebody. And other board members will say, we hired this firm so that I don't have to do all this work. So I'm just going to read the 10 applicants. You can do whichever, in a typical firm search, I would say to the board, each of you can do whatever you want. You can read all of them, but at least read the ones that we've recommended to move forward. In all the years of doing searches, only one time did I have a board collectively say, you know what, we've read all the applications and there's one person that you didn't put in your top 10 and then we still want to interview them. And that is absolutely the right of the board. It's the board's search, it's the board's candidates.
Only one time?
Only one time. We're pretty good at it. Yeah. That candidate didn't get the job. That was going to be your next question, right?
No, I was just thinking, I know there was some shifting, like based on the board conversation, but I guess maybe it's more when we had the conversation, but it wasn't with you.
Okay. That other firm.
I do have it's a Liz question, but that executive session is allowed under Oregon law, and I know you do this in Oregon all the time, but.
I believe so. I'll have to go back to, you can't, there's certain things you can't discuss in the, I
Okay.
think it's salary, you can't, but we'll get.
It doesn't jump out at me as one that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean it
Oh,
doesn't
I can
exist.
look, I can look right now.
And the thing is, because it's in the portal, like we don't actually have the records. And you can talk about like candidate A in ways that doesn't disclose their name. I think the media can come, they can't report.
Correct.
And you can just not, you just don't use their names. And it's because we don't have paper copies, then there's no public record.
And I would, well, let's talk about, we actually do use names in our executive sessions.
Oh,
Yeah, we do. But it's always good to check with
We can
counsel.
work through those legal
Yeah.
issues, but I do, it is important because I want to make sure the rules of the executive session are important, and I hear what you're saying about the public records. I wonder if it's been challenged, because often when we say, oh, a consultant has the records, they're not public, but when it actually gets challenged to the DA says, no, it's public. So I don't know if that's been challenged in Oregon. I don't know if that's established case law or not, but I would want us to be really thoughtful about that process, because I think that's a really important step.
One of the reasons on the ideal profile, you're collecting input, you're putting the ideal profile in the public. And in Portland, I would recommend you have a second meeting where you've taken public comment twice on it, because that's how your public has access to giving you feedback about the search. And then and you do the salary range in public before you post. So that's the public part. And then I believe that's the conduit to get that part into executive session.
So, right, there are specific rules about the employment of a chief executive officer, of other public officers. You have to, what Christie said, you have to advertise the vacancy. The public has adopted regular hiring procedures, the opportunity to follow.
Great.
So,
and then you sort of answered the question I had, but I mean, it is interesting to forward all 25 applicants to the entire board, because it feels like it could create a situation with a lot of second guessing by 7 board members, and I guess I raise that as a practical concern. It sounds like you haven't had that experience. But
we have it. And so we're going to, later in this agenda, we're going to talk about what that might look like in a Portland environment. But I will say we have not had that concern. We've had it only once. And to me, that's not a concern. If one time there's, I shouldn't say even one time, it's the board's decision. And typically we hear board members say, I mean, more than typically, like almost always, board members will say, I read all 25 and you guys were absolutely right. Those are the 10 that I would have picked to move forward.
But in your typical search, though, you do forward 10 candidates. And it looks like, I know you're about to get to this, the board then decides who to invite.
Say that again, Andrew.
Well, no, just what you've laid out is that of the 25, you narrowed down to 10. We
Right.
come together in executive session. We say you did a great job. And then of that 10, the board then discusses, you say, 4 to 6 to invite to sort of move forward. Is that, and that's different than processes I've been through for executive searches in other governments. Is that a school district specific thing? It's a lot of applications for the entire board to be going through, rather than having a subcommittee.
You mean 10 is a lot of
10 is
applications?
a lot, right.
I have not yet had a board member say that's too many applications, but every district's different, and so that might feel
Yeah,
that
and
way.
I think the
here.
question I'm more asking is this sort of unique to school districts? Do you do it?
I
in
see
school
what you're
districts, or you
saying.
just-
We primarily are a school district search firm. I see what you're saying now.
Okay. I mean, I'll just say when Metro hired a chief executive officer 4 years ago, the whole board did not get together to review 10 candidates. Like there were subcommittees. It was narrowed down to 2 or 3 finalists. There were discussions along
Sure.
the way, keeping board members, apprised. But it's a pretty heavy involvement by the board.
I would
pretty
say-
early in the process.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I would say that in the second phase of the 2017 search, I think we brought like 12 we brought a lot of candidates out. And that was partly a function also is like we knew the pool, not just because they met us, was going to get smaller. And so trying to keep the philosophy of like keeping a competitive pool all the way to the end. Because people, for a variety of reasons, will drop out. And there were people who were on paper like, man, this person was like the national superintendent of the year. And then it's like, we met them and it's like, oh. But it did give the board, I think by the end, it gave them a really good sense of like just the comparative. So we weren't just looking at 3 models, like we'd seen 12, and it's like, that's not our type. And like, yes, those 3 candidates had these things we really liked, let's try and keep them in the pool. But it actually I found it was a good learning experience, and we needed to keep the pool large because even at the very end, the pool got smaller without us making it smaller. I mean, like we select people out, like we exit people out, and they exit themselves out. And sometimes it's like, maybe we shouldn't exit them out because the pool's getting pretty small. So hold them just in case to refresh the pool.
One thing to think about too is that whoever you hire is going to work for, even though you're a collective board of 7 and they're working for the board, they also have a relationship with 7 individual people who are their bosses. And if I were wanting to be hired, I would want to be fully hired by the full board too. And part of that, going through the whole process together, helps you really come to strong agreement about who you collectively hire. So I think the process is good. And I don't know if it was different with Metro in that it's a bigger board. I'm on
Same size.
Same size. Yeah, I'm on a couple other boards that I would say, oh yeah, you don't want all 25 of them.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I was talking about. So I know we're going to get to that.
We're going to get to that for sure.
That portion of it too, as far as when we get to that stage, kind of breaking it up. But we can get to that when we.
And it's your decision too on that.
So let's, I think I just got a few more slides on overall, and then we can get to what you're all excited to talk about was, okay, well, what's it going to look like here, right? Okay, so at the end, so this slate meeting happens, and at the end, a typical number that you would invite for what we call first round interviews, a typical number of candidates you'd invite is between 4 and 6 out of your 25. So we end that slate meeting, we end that engagement session with, I'm just going to pick the number between 5 candidates that are going to be invited for first round interviews. We will do all the coordinating, the logistics, the setting it up. We highly recommend those are virtual. We can talk about why, but we think that it just makes a lot of sense from a financial and from just an efficiency standpoint. We'll build the interview questions based on your next superintendent criteria, but we will also invite you directors to offer input or say, what's your favorite question that you'd love to ask in hiring process. So it's collaborative, but we'll own the document that is the interview questions. We typically do it in one long day. And in small print, I wrote breakfast through evening. That's typically how we do it. We get together on breakfast, and by evening, you've finished your interviews and you're selecting, let's say you've had 5 interviews, you're selecting your finalists. And typically that number of finalists is between 2 and 4. 3 is the most common number. So let's just, in this imaginary search, you interviewed 5 people in round 1 and 3 of them moved forward to the next round at the end of the day, and those are your finalists. There's a lot of prep work that goes into the finalist round by your consultant firm. So we shoulder the great majority of it. We will, earlier in the process, we will have facilitated a conversation with you board or with a group of board members about what are the various events that happen in round 2. And the key question that's going to govern what those events are is that 3rd bullet point, which is, I know you've talked about at your board, and I know that we'll talk about together, maybe tonight a little bit, but more in our next planning meeting, which is about the public release of finalist names or the not releasing names publicly. As this is a PowerPoint about how we typically do it, I will say that we typically do not release names of finalists. As a firm, we think that's the best practice, and we encourage boards to not do that, and we'll tell you why. And at the end of the day, it's the board's decision, and we'll support whatever decision you make. But in the current era, we do recommend, and we recommend strongly, that the names of finalists are not released until you only have one, and that person is signing a contract. I know you have strong feelings about that. I promise we'll talk.
No, not feelings, research. I want to make sure I did a lot of research.
Even better than feelings is research.
Absolutely.
So the events of round 2 can include a variety of things, and of course, depending whether it's public or not, sort of makes it different, right? You're in a public search, you can take candidates on a walk through the school, you wouldn't do that where the names are not being released publicly. Our events often include, or typically include, a community stakeholder panel or community constituent panel, which is just what it sounds like. And community members would typically sign confidentiality affidavits. A reverse interview with the sitting superintendent is sometimes useful, particularly if the superintendent's been there for a while. A reverse interview is where the candidate interviews the superintendent, not the superintendent interviewing the candidate. It's an opportunity for the candidate to deeply learn the work. The sitting superintendent is certainly not part of the decision-making process, but is a resource to candidates. We often have them have coffee with the executive assistant. And we certainly will engage in a final interview with the board, and usually that's a lengthy one, 2 to 2.5 hours in length.
Sometimes that community constituent group could also be senior staff. One
Yes,
panel might
thank
be,
you.
you might say we want senior staff to do one interview and give us a set of interviews.
Or even a combination. You're right. We call it a community panel, but it doesn't mean specifically only community members. It
It can be
includes
internal
and
staff.
students are on that as well. Yeah, thank you, Christy.
Yeah, the student experiences can be really powerful as you think through how you want to engage your board, your student who's the advisor to the board, and panels of kids. They have great insights.
I don't know if you're going to go into this, but what do you do with that stakeholder panel feedback? How do you structure it?
We structure it. Let's see if the next slide speaks to that. No. Okay. So what that looks like is a group of typically 12 members of the community, staff, students, parents, family members. They come in and they engage in an interview. We facilitate that interview. The interview is based on the next superintendent criteria. We collect two kinds of feedback from those. The first is they engage in a group debrief. So we ask some potent questions, they engage with each other, and we are taking notes as they're engaging with each other, and that's the group debrief, which board will see. And then after that group debrief, we ask each community member to complete a survey, an individual online survey monkey survey on what their impressions are. And so then your board will also see those. So you'll get 12 individual survey responses, and there'll be some parallels, right, between the group debrief and the individual, and there'll be some differences because not everybody's going to say everything aloud that they want to say individually. And as the body of work, as we move into this final interview that you'll have as a board in a typical search, you're going to start to have a lot of data at your hands. You're going to have, I just described a whole lot of data, 12 survey responses, group debriefs per candidate. So you start to build up like a level of data and input around these candidates that you'll use in your final interview.
Patty has a question.
And go ahead.
Let's go to Patty.
Yeah, I have a question. So we've got community stakeholder panels, but we're not releasing the name of the applicant. So
That is correct. So yes, Patty, and thank you for raising that. So the members of that panel sign confidentiality affidavits. So they are, and in every email, usually I drive them crazy because by the time I meet with them, I've probably sent them 6 emails telling them how confidential this is and why it's confidential. So you're right on both accounts. Yeah.
Okay, great.
My experience with those stakeholder panels for hiring is just to be very careful that we don't ask them to rank the candidates.
Absolutely. We never do that.
Yeah, and they will anyway, but
they'll want
to remind them that that's because you set up a dynamic, you know this with the rest of the board, you can set up a dynamic where that stakeholder panel might say, oh, we have our first, second, third candidate, then the board goes with the third candidate and everyone gets mad.
Right.
So really structuring it as feedback, input, impressions.
It's not your decision.
It's not, and reminding them of that to Michelle's
Absolutely.
point earlier.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Well said. The other pieces that are happening around this time is that there is a full background check being completed by a third-party entity. We are doing let me say that differently. We facilitate a series of reference calls on each candidate, and it's very different than that first one. That first one way back at the beginning of the process is if Christy applies, when she applies, I ask Christy, who's somebody that I could call right now that's going to speak to your work? And Christy picks that person. Okay, that's great on a certain level, right? But that's also not great, right? Like it's something, but it's not everything. So at this point in the process, we do something different. We go to Christy and we say, Christy, you're a finalist. I've looked at I've looked at your org chart of your current district, and I've looked at the org chart of the district you were at before, and here are the 10 people that I'm going to make phone calls to. And Christy's going to go, okay. And I'm going to say, so you have a day to reach out to those people, and you can tell them to please be confidential, but we want to talk to all of them. Some of those people are going to most of those people are going to love Christy, because who doesn't love Christy? But there might be one or two people that weren't her biggest fans, right? And we want to talk to them too. We're not looking to only, I mean, I don't know that there's any people in the world that you're not, but we're owning that, right? We're saying these are the people we want to talk to, and board members are deeply involved in that reference calling process. So we see that as a board member responsibility, and we'd ask you each to please sign up. Sometimes some board members want to opt out, but in general, most board members do. At least
I'm
make
doing reference checks.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't force you. But it's actually.
I am on board.
Oh, you are on board.
I am on board.
Oh, you are on board.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
excellent.
Yes, sir.
I'll give you a buzz.
Yes, sir.
I think it's really important to hear the voices. Yeah.
I'm gonna come down here, prop up, get my stuff going. It's gonna be reference call day.
I love it. So the reference calls, and then yeah, okay. So that's what the last two bullet points are about the reference call piece. So back to what we were talking about, the amount of input and data that you now have on your finalists. It's a growing amount, right? You've got the community members, you've got the reference calls, you've got the investigative background check, which hopefully comes out seamless. Okay, so this is what I was actually just saying. You have a lot of data. You go to your second interview. I'm going to move this agenda forward a little bit. You engage with the candidates for 2 to 2.5 hours. That final interview, by the way, is the only interview in our typical search which is unscripted. In other words, you're not walking in with a set of interview questions that we've created. You are asking questions specific to each candidate based on the body of work that you have. So there are specific questions that you're going to ask each finalist that have been raised either by you in earlier interviews or by community members. So that's a pretty boisterous, engaged interview, and we're going to encourage you to grill that candidate, because that candidate might be your next superintendent. Don't go too soft on them.
This is going to be awesome.
And I just want to clarify that is something we can do in executive session. We can interview candidates in executive session as a full board.
I'm not an attorney, but I will say that I have done that countless times in Oregon.
Great.
We did like the airport, I think, last time, first round.
Yeah, often you'll do them somewhere else.
We do them in different locations.
Yeah.
This is going to be super exciting. Am I the only one super excited?
I'm excited.
This is awesome.
It is kind of awesome.
This is absolutely awesome. Okay.
When we finish that process, that second interview, we come together in executive session and we work hard to coalesce around a single candidate. Most of the time that happens. Sometimes we need more time and we need more resources, but typically in a typical search, we come together and still in executive session, and there is a coalescence around a single candidate. At that point, usually 2 members of the board are the negotiations committee. I don't mean labor negotiations, I mean contract negotiations with the candidate. And once those negotiations are completed, the board will schedule a special board meeting where the candidate's name is announced to the public and it's not open. I mean, you have to, of course, vote in open session to hire your new superintendent. So that's, and communications piece plays all right, so you can read that. And I think that is a typical search, ladies and gentlemen, friends. Thank you for being great active listeners. Okay, I know you have a lot of thoughts about what we do about this. And I'm actually going to ask Christy to talk about the very first piece of work, which is engagement. So keep holding those thoughts, but we do want to be jumping into engagement even before we finish the design of the search. So Christy, take it away.
Okay, and you can go on to the next slide then. Yeah, we want to talk about engagement because really in our mind, we're feeling already a little bit behind for engagement because we know the intensity of what you've contracted with us for, and we want to get going. And if our goal would be that the engagement, we could have it fully completed and a draft profile to you by spring break. So that's pretty aggressive, which is why we're jumping right in. So the things I'll want to start to get scheduled is one-on-one board meetings with board members. And then I've already gotten our search firms scheduled. So I already have blocks of time that we have blocked out in March for the actual 40 online focus group sessions. We're not picking who those focus group sessions are with. We have some ideas, other than the board for sure, all of you, some senior staff for sure, but you're going to need to help us, whoever, if it's either collectively as a board or a small group of the board, is going to help us design what's the engagement going to be and with who. One of the things we'll ask, let me finish the third bullet first. The last thing you've contracted with us for is 2 on-site focus group events. We would think about those events and want you to think about those events as people who typically wouldn't answer a survey, or a group of people that is critically important that you hear from them and you want us to go to them. So Hector is skilled at doing Spanish full day on-site sessions. We're thinking at least 1 potentially in Spanish, but again, that'll be up to you. And Hector's already said he's available the first full week of March. So like around the 7th or 8th of March that we could do an on-site, those on-site focus sessions. But again, we want to be really strategic. It might also be a time that you say, hey, one of those we want at a high school with kids, or we want it out at this community center. This group of people is specifically important. So that's what we're going to ask you to help us with, and your district staff as well. You have people in the district that also are going to know who should probably be on the list. So a couple things I'm going to ask for you tonight is, one is, if you have a specific person that needs to be invited to a focus group, or a group of people that needs to be invited to a focus group in your mind, we just want you to send those to Roseanne. And we're thinking by like Monday morning, if you could have those sent to, and it doesn't, just think of more along the way, we still have some planning time. So if you will do that, then the second question, and I think this will come when you're talking about a work group, the next question is then who am I going to work with to design your engagement? The goal would be that next Tuesday, either late afternoon, evening, but we've tentatively put that aside as a time that I could either come to you, or we could do a virtual event. And I think that Steve was going to join me, and we'll design the focus groups. And then I'm going to ask Roseanne to be included in that as well, because then she becomes the conduit for getting invites out and scheduling. You don't have to do any of that part. You just have to help me design the who. So that's how we're thinking.
Can I throw one thing in there?
Yep.
And Roseanne, you might think about, there is a large body of work in terms of inviting people. You might want to bring somebody else in also, maybe from comms or whoever you're thinking. Might need to be 2 staff.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, we did that last year in Salem Kaiser, where it's both the board manager plus somebody out of the comms department to help with that. And then they would help facilitate some of the access to technology. On the virtual sessions, one hiccup that we ran across in Salem Kaiser was we had people that we wanted to do a virtual session with that didn't have access to technology. So we brought them in and gave them technology to do other virtual sessions so that they could still have access. So there's some ways that we can really work on the accessibility, and that we tried out last year in Salem Kaiser. So for everyone, it's, if you have a specific group, specific person, names to Roseanne by Monday. Steve and I and Tammy are thinking next week we'd like to begin those one-on-ones with board members as well. We think you're the first and really important group to launch with the engagement. So I'm going to also give Roseanne a schedule that works for us, and it'll be more times than just 7 times for then you to work around to say, hey, I can be in the interview with you on this time. So I'll give her a bunch of times next week and the early on in the following week for you to sign up, but I'll let her coordinate that. And we'll also do those virtually. Unless you're buying lunch, and then I'll come to you. Or wait.
On one of the days of Monday, that we're gonna be offering?
I can be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mondays is going to be the day that I will need. Whatever, figure out a time, it will need to be on a Monday. Because that's the day that I've allocated to do
And I'll come.
some of this stuff.
Yeah, but next Tuesday I'll work with a small group of you to figure out.
And then
how-
whatever times
yeah.
Gary forces me, when he shows up and says, you're coming. He does that too.
I'll defer to the chair. Do you want to figure out who I'm going to work with next Tuesday, or do you want to have it?
To focus on the engagement work?
Yeah, or do you want to wait until you have a bigger conversation around
Yeah,
the
let's
board?
wait till we have the rest of the conversation.
Okay.
Okay, but we'll try and, we do want to come back to that before we depart.
Before we depart
Okay.
tonight.
So let's have that conversation. And Steve and Tammy, you're leading this conversation about. I'll let you introduce it, but it seems to me that maybe it's not only that topic, but also a little bit of how does the PPS design look? Because I looking around the room, I can tell that folks are anxious to talk about several aspects of the things we just described. So Steve and Tammy, take it away.
Thanks, Hank. Good evening, Portland Public Schools Board of Directors. We're delighted to join you. Tammy and I have been asked to speak a bit about the process and at what point boards typically engage, either as a committee of the whole or through a board work group. At some point, we'll need direction from the board on how you'd like to partner and in what form. So let me just summarize what Hank and Christy have already shared relative to our typical search process. Where possible, we strongly recommend that boards do almost all of their search work together. Planning meeting, finalizing and acting on the next superintendent criteria, all facets of the selection and interview phase, all of that we strongly recommend is done as a committee of the whole. There are certainly a few exceptions when we advise that a board work group be formed to assist, particularly around some of the planning details. As Christy identified, the scope of focus group engagements, our proposal has 40 focus groups built in. 3 community interview panels will need direction from the board on the composition of the community interview panels. And then, as Hank indicated, we'll need direction on round 2 events and activities for finalists. In most instances, this process, when done together by the board, can strengthen the board team. It can set the stage for a successful superintendent transition, which is why, in part, we strongly recommend most of the work being done as a committee of the whole. And I asked Tammy to just talk a little bit about some of the rationale behind that, just in terms of vetting and learning and strengthening understanding together as a collective body. Tammy?
I'll just, I think you were pretty comprehensive. I will just say this. One of the most important things that's an outcome is to get the best superintendent possible and to hit the ground running as a cohesive team. And engaging in the process in the way that we've described as a whole team creates that calibration, and it creates the groundwork for a successful sort of launch and with this new leader. And when the board is sort of factioned out, then there could be stops and stalls that I don't think necessarily you're going to want to have happen. And I think about just my own process of being hired by our board. That cohesive team just allowed us to hit the ground running with some pretty important levy efforts, all these things we needed to do, we were a team. And I think that's one of the most important outcomes that you're going to want to happen as a result of using this process of the whole board, getting calibrated, getting on the same page. So just want to echo what Steve said.
Thanks, Tammy. We are looking for direction, and certainly would turn this over to Chair Hollins to help facilitate a conversation around the board's interest relative to doing the work as a committee of the whole, and where work groups might be formed to help inform the search process. Chair Hollins.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll kind of dive in around that. I understand the piece of doing the whole board piece. I understand the cohesiveness of having the whole board do stuff. I push back because I think this board is a strong board. The process that we had used by bifurcating groups and letting and trusting our board members to do something is literally the same process that we did when we picked you guys, right? And so I don't necessarily think that, it's a negative for this board. I don't know about other boards, but for this board to trust their board members to be able to make certain decisions in the best interest of the board. We did the same thing during the strike thing that we did as well. And we were able to stand together, become strong. So I don't know necessarily if that's the outcome that we need. I feel that we are a strong board and we are a trusting board. I trust any one of my colleagues to make a decision on the best path forward for our board. And if there's any other, questions around that, anyone can speak up and say, hey, you know what, I don't trust them folks, and that's okay. But
this work session is going to take a great turn.
Chair Hollins, if I could,
so that's kind of my my thought process.
Chair Hollins.
Some of the things that I proposed earlier wasn't a division of the board. It was just an allocation of duties for board members as a whole. And that's kind of what that process was. Go ahead, Patty.
Yeah, well, Gary, I just wondered, are you doing that to save us time? For me, I would just like to see it all. I mean, I'm interested. And it looks like we've hired this group to do the hard work for us. And then I personally would just like to have a chance to see it all. And it doesn't look like well, maybe you could tell us, how long do you think it does take for us to read, say we just want to read the top 10? How much time would that be for us? Anybody on the team?
Boards can spend hours. Some individual board can process reviewing files within an hour. It really depends on how deeply an individual board director wants to dive into the application. I do want to provide just one clarifying comment. The message here, I want to be clear, is not about trust. Right. It's about building a shared understanding and knowledge, listening to board directors engage in productive struggle, engage in discourse about the strengths and the weaknesses of candidates. There is an emerging shared consensus through that deliberation and discourse. So I just want to clarify that this isn't about communicating a level of trust or distrust. This is just about building collective wisdom with everyone in the room, strengthening the evaluation process, and bringing a level of rigor to the approach before you make one of the most important decisions that you will be making this year. which is hiring your next superintendent of schools.
Gotcha. And I think for me, it's not necessarily not having that the whole process be bifurcated with certain board members. I'm thinking just certain parts of it. So like what Director Scott was talking about, well, if we're going to give us the whole list of 25, yeah, I'm sure some people are going to read the whole list of 25. But when we get to that 10 piece, and I'm not looking at Julia, yeah, she's going to read the whole 25.
I'm gonna find that
But-
one that Hank didn't.
What I'm saying is, as we move from that 10 to that 6, at that 10 level, and I'm just using that as an example, at that 10 level, I think that work can be broken up and shared amongst individuals, in groups of board members to select that next group that's going to be that 6. And then at that 6 level, I think, yeah, we all should come together and talk about that when we get to that 6 level to make it to that final 2 or 3 level, and ultimately the next superintendent. So that's kind of where I was coming at from there.
So, yeah, a couple different thoughts. I think the different parts of the process are important, right? When we're doing what. I think this beginning part about getting our superintendent criteria, what do you call it? The next superintendent criteria. We all have to agree on that. So that's an important part of this process, right? And we need to hash that out, right? If there's disagreement about I want to focus on this, I want to focus on that, like we've got to have agreement on that, and we can only do that as an entire board. I will just say bluntly, in my experience, the process you've laid out is very micromanaging by all 7 board members. I mean, I will tell you, when I hire, I don't sit on the first 2 panels, right? And I'm the hiring manager. I wait, I have hiring panels, I get diverse folks in there to come in and stakeholders and people at the level and higher and below, and then they recommend to me 3 candidates. I interview the final 3 candidates. And I've never thought about, oh man, what if there was someone in that top 15 that they missed, right? Because I trust them. I trust, the folks I'm putting on those panels to do that job. I hear what you're saying, Steve, about how this can bring a board together. It could. I could also see how it could divide a board, right? So if we're looking at 10 candidates and someone says, these 2 are my favorite, they're absolutely my favorite, and the majority of the board says, I don't like those 2 at all.
Oh yeah, I'm not
And
talking
we're
any
not-
this year.
And we're not moving those people forward. I could imagine that board member who felt like they were the strongest candidate is going to go into those finalist interviews with the 4 or 5 that we have, and is going to think, well, my favorite's back there, so I don't like number 1, I don't like number 2, number 3, number 4. There could be division there as well. And just to be blunt, if you hadn't spent a lot of time investing in those top candidates and you're just looking at the top 4 or 5, those are the ones you're focused on. So I think that dynamic may work the way you've laid it out. I could see it working a different way as well. Obviously, this is the whole board decision. I will just tell you, and if the whole board wants to review all 25, I won't be. I will review 10 if you send them to me. And I would narrow it down to 3 or 4. I don't think we need to narrow it down to 6, because you can always go back, right? If 3 or 4 don't work, you can always go back, to the well again. But, if that's what the board wants to do, that's what we'll do. I would also be very comfortable with a subcommittee narrowing it down. I would be very comfortable with you narrowing it down.
Anybody but me narrowing it
I think
I'm gonna focus.
If we've done our job is upfront setting that criteria. Applying the criteria can be done by a lot of people. And then the intangibles are what happen at the very end. But I'm not sure we want to be dealing with those intangibles when we're talking about 6, 7, 8, 10 candidates, right? Then you're still talking about, are they meeting the majority of that criteria that we've all.
I'm with Andrew.
I'm still not talking to Andrew if he don't pick my 2. It's already there, Andrew. You started this.
So I feel very strongly that the full board should. And people don't have to read the whole 25, but I think that everybody should get the 10 the group is recommending. And if they want to look at the 25, that's up to them. The reason I say that, so having gone through it twice, it does. I think actually also gone to 2 university president searches. The same thing is like, actually, if you don't include people, I think it complicates things at the end. Because what if you have somebody insisting, I want to see these 2, then you can have a conversation about like, what is it about those 2 that you are really want to see. And what I find with this group is people listen to each other, and it's like either somebody realizes like, yeah, I'm not that invested in those 2, or other people are like, I see why you want to have that individual in there. I also think it and I know this from talking to superintendents and presidents who've hired, it's really helpful to them. Because otherwise, really, you're just meeting somebody, potentially half your board.
Let's be clear, the finals.
They won't know.
If they don't get hired, they don't.
Well, no, I'm saying, but the finalist, so I hired a university president that I met once. It was like, I don't know about this person, and like, it was a good gut feeling about it. Because the way it was set up is like, we only got to meet the finalists. And to me, the value, it's not, hey, I don't trust somebody else. It's like, it's more, I value other people's point of view. Because like, what if I get like really settled on this is the person, and it's like, oh, but I heard something from like Gary pointed out, like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. And that, to me, that's the bigger value of sort of the discussion among the board about like, what is it you saw in that person that you think is going to be a great leader? And, you know, why did you not even have that on your list? And I do think through the process, if we do things as a group, usually it's a process. It's amazing how at the end, the group actually, there's very little division. I mean, because we're talking through what our values are, the match, we thought about candidates, and I think we're influencing each other. And that's a great thing versus, I think, very helpful versus one person not being part of it. And like, I'm not super invested in this candidate because I haven't spent very much time with them. I'm not sure, you know, the thing that I wasn't sure about never got answered. So I feel very strongly that we all should do it. And I would hope that we'd all want to.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to Patty too. And Michelle. Go ahead, Michelle.
Hi there. Sorry, I left for a minute and I'm back. I think Director Bruna Edwards, you were talking about the importance of the full board being involved. And I wanted to state that I agree with that. I think this is one of the most important aspects of the work that we do, really that we're really supposed to do, is very discreet. And this is one of the ones that's very important. And I hope I'm on topic, but that's what I would like to advocate for, is that the entire board be as engaged as possible, not necessarily subgroups.
Patty?
Yeah, and when Julia mentioned, it really has nothing to do with trust, for me anyway. It has to do with getting all the information. And it also has to do with, as Julia said, hearing what other people have to say, because I respect everybody on this board for different things. Everybody really has a different take on things, different knowledge, different background, different way of looking at things. And I want to hear all of that. Not just, you know, I've looked at 3 and I think, well, this is the best. And somebody else, say, Eddie says, well, I think this one's the best and I trust Eddie. So then I look kind of at those 2, but I haven't really read all of them myself and really talked about them. And I just think it's really important because we all bring something different. And I think we should just all look at everything. Plus, this group has been doing this for years and is suggesting this is the best way. So somehow I think we should take that knowledge that we're paying for and use it.
Absolutely.
I also want to ask, why would we not do it the way that the consultant why would we do it any other way besides what the consultant recommends?
It's worth clarifying, nobody's suggesting the whole board shouldn't be involved in the hiring decision. Like, the whole board's involved in the hiring. The only question is where the whole board comes in. Hank and the firm are suggesting we come in at 10. I'm suggesting we could come in at 4 or 5. We could also come in at 25. I mean, the same principle applies, right? So all these arguments about getting the whole board, we could get together and review 25 candidate, interviews, or maybe you get 50 candidates, we could come together at 50. All I'm saying, and it's not just a matter of saving time, it's just also a matter of, we're paying a lot for a search firm to do this work. I mean, we could as a board do all of that as well. I think that's less efficient. I think I actually trust the firm to do a better job than we will of applying the criteria we've done to the candidates. And then the whole board is absolutely involved in the hiring decision. So it's really the only question here, I think, that we're talking about is, are we sitting around for 4 hours talking about 10 candidates, or are we sitting around for 2 hours talking about 5 candidates?
Have you
I think
talked?
there's a lot of,
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, yeah, we're hiring them, but I think they're doing also a lot of other work too, like getting out there and figuring all this out and the outreach and the search. You said there's only once ever happened that a board selected someone outside your top 10, right?
For an interview.
For an interview.
For an interview. Not
Yeah,
for the-
I think a few of us are going for number 2.
You're welcome to it. I have no hard feelings if you do that. But
yeah,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I would personally like to be in to CCCL. I mean, I definitely want to read the top 10, but at least have a chance to skim the other 25. But I kind of want to say I see both your points. I think I want to also hear what Steve has to say, but for a lot of us, it's our first time searching for a superintendent. So I think maybe it might be important just to have built-in flexibility for cases that people do want to participate more or not. But I also value a lot of us as a board coming together and sharing the reasons why we have different preferences, because I think we learn a lot from each other. I want to make sure that, that would be my number one priority to have a system for that.
Okay, so it sounds like the majority of us wants to go with the plan that they have here, so we'll go that way. All right, let's move on. Now
I agree with you.
the other issue, sorry, Steve, you want to say something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a point of clarity to Director Scott's comments. Typically, we do not spend 4 hours in this late meeting, and candidly, the firm will bring to you tiered recommendations of that slate. We'll bring a tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. We'll take the 10 and we'll just sort of segment this in a way that helps, given our review of the applicant files, given our preliminary interviews, given the reference call, given the ideal profile and some rigorous application of those criterion against all of that data input, we'll come to you with some recommendations. But often it's the deliberative process and different points of view that allows the board to say, human capital enterprises, we want to advance these 4 to 6. Typically that happens within a 2-hour or less conversation.
Great. All right, so we got past that. So the next thing that was a concern of mine is the transparency piece, and I'm gonna just say what I need to say. When we wait until the final candidate and then we present that to the whole public, it seems like we're working in silence, working behind closed doors, or working and keeping our community in the dark. And for this community at this time, I think transparency and openness is actually what we need to have with this process. And I know you guys have a different way of doing things, and I think I understand that. And so we can just have that type of conversation. I'm not saying that and I was going to just give a whole bunch of statistics and stuff from folks that I know at Harvard and all that stuff, but I'm not going to go through all that. I'm just talking about what we need here, that I see we need here for Portland, Oregon. Mm-hmm. I understand there has to be a level of confidentiality at a certain point, and I'm all for that. I feel once we get down to that 4 to 6 round 1 piece, I think at that point we need to be as open and as transparent as possible. And I want to know how we would do that and what you guys thought about that as well.
I'm for, so this was the area where I wanted to be very, very, when we get down to those last few, I think we broadcast it to the world, tell everybody, you shouldn't even have got in this race if you didn't want get down to that point and then be like, well, I don't want my other job to know. I don't want you here. I need somebody that's ready to let the world know that I'm finna go to Portland and I'm finna transform everything. I can't wait to get there. This is about to be the best move that I ever made. This is where I want. I love the rain. We need that person that loves the rain. Like you said, like that'll turn people away. I want that person that is excited about the rain. So when we get down to it, I want to be able to let the whole community know this is where we're at. These are the ones that we're going for because everybody's going to have some buy-in. I want them to be a part of the process. I want them to see what we're doing. I want them to be going online like it's March Madness, looking at the interviews and checking it out. I don't know if they can, but March Madness is coming up, and so it's on my mind.
And I know there's,
Won't
and
happen by March.
and I know there is a lot of concern when they talk about, some highly qualified candidates may be reluctant to apply because if it's with a school district that is more transparent process. And I know a lot of times there's concerns about privacy, confidentiality, and things like that. But I think, a search process can actually enhance the pool of candidate by attracting individuals who are committed to transparency, accountability for Oregon. We're talking about accountability and we're talking about transparency, and we've been talking about it. We said it a bunch of times yesterday at the meeting, but then we go into a process that's not. It is almost counterproductive to what we've been saying this whole time about accountability and transparency. I think we can attract candidates because they have those same values. I think we attract those candidates because they have that same purpose of accountability and transparency piece. And I think it also will signal to candidates that school districts have values, openness, fairness, accountability. And we want people who share those values and who's willing to participate in that. And then I'll leave it at that for right now. I think Michelle has a hand up.
Yes, sorry. I kind of feel both ways about the transparency piece because we do want to attract someone that's like going to lay it all on the table. At the same time, if you have a job and you're working in a community, I mean, imagine like for Portland, I think the candidate's sense of wanting to be private until at least maybe they're a finalist is a big deal. When you start looking around and getting interviews, even if they're just informational, you signal to your home district that you're kind of looking around, and that might be a chilling effect for somebody that's really good that kind of wants to just put their toe in the waters, and see what's out there without notifying, the rest of the nation and their district specifically that they're out looking.
I missed that clarifying question before you may get is, at what point did you recommend, was it only the finalists?
So-
Was it only when the board has chosen the candidate that the name gets public, or is it?
If I may, and I want to be clear, I put it out there, we do recommend what I'm about to share, and I hear great passion from your board chair and vice chair, and so we'll go either way, but I'd like to take a moment if I can and just outline why we feel the way we do.
Be passionate.
Also, we should.
Be passionate?
Make sure that everybody has a chance to weigh in.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say this is a decision I would love to not make tonight and make at your next meeting, if that's okay. Because this might be a richer conversation. I promise to get you out in the next half hour, but as you will. But let me just share some thoughts. And again, my vested interest is a search that is going to work for you and is going to bring you a successful superintendent, a great pool, and a successful superintendent. Here are some things that you may or may not have thought about. And what do you know? I actually have a slide to go. Okay, so the first one I just want to say.
Never would have guessed that.
You can argue, I will just say our experience is very strong that your pool will be impacted. And just weigh that. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it this way, but do know that there are candidates that simply will not apply. To answer your question, Director Scott, there are candidates who will not apply. There are some candidates, and some very talented candidates, who will not go into a search where their name will be floated before a decision is made. In other words, they will only be in a search if their name becomes public, if they're the successful one. They don't want their name to be, Portland Public School has these 3 finalists, because for the very reasons Director DePass said, then they have to go back to their district if they didn't get the job and explain why they don't want to be there. And again, I don't mean to argue the weight of whether that's the kind of person you want or not. I'm just saying there will be people that won't apply for this job if that's a decision you make.
I have a quick question. So if that kind of person we're looking at hiring don't want to do that for their district, is that possibly that same superintendent would do that to us and won't let the public and everybody know or us know that they're applying for another job until they have one already lined up?
Because that's the character of that person. So the answer to that,
I don't think it's a characteristic.
No, can you answer the question? I just want to know, could we potentially have that same thing done to us as well?
I think whoever you hire might very well be a person that doesn't want to go public when they are applying for a new job.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But you'll have already contacted their district in reference checking. So while it's not public and splashed out there, their district will have.
That's I thank you for saying that, and I think thank you, because I didn't hear that piece, but maybe there's a piece which I would fully understand. You don't want to be caught blindsided by your superintendent who says, "Hey, chair, I just took another job at another district." Like that feels horrible to you. I would say that the great majority, I think I want to say all of them, but I can't go through my Rolodex right now, have shared with their board chair and their board leadership prior to the public announcement that they're going somewhere else, so that a board chair, I would say that is a character issue. If you don't tell your board chair and your vice chair that you've taken a new job and they read about it in the Oregonian the next day, that's a character issue. But in the searches that we do, even though it's confidential, we're expecting that person to share with their leadership privately, "Hey, just want to let you know I'm going to be named or I'm a finalist for another search." Anyway, let me just hit some points about why this might not be something you want to do. And again, whatever the board decides, we will support.
No, that's one thing. And then when you say why not, do you have reasons why we should?
No, you may.
I want to know them as a firm.
He doesn't think we should.
No, I get it. But as a firm, you should be able to look at both sides, right?
I think you make those points really compelling. I think
you should be, as a firm, you should be able to have both sides looked at.
I know what both sides are.
Okay. I withdraw that question. I withdraw my question. Okay.
No, you don't.
Go ahead.
I think there are many members of communities who expect to know who the finalists are. I think because we live in an era where in many searches it is. So you will have people saying, "Wait a minute, how come Portland isn't announcing their superintendents?" So you will have that. You'll have that expectation.
And then what do you do about leaks? So if we go through that process and leaks come out, then now we have to deal with a whole nother transparency and trust issue from the community because leaks has been out there and we haven't been transparent. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, bullet point number 2 is kind of one of my concerns. I'm curious what you're going to say about that. Because I can also see it backfire.
So let's talk about number 2. So in a public, let's move forward and assume that you are announcing, let's say finalists. I would really discourage you at the semifinalist at the 6th level for the reasons Director Mapass said. Let's say that you've agreed that at the finalist level, your 3 finalists are announced publicly. You will get, as the vice chair said, I forget the words you used, you want March Madness, right? Everybody's going to be out looking, everyone's going to be Googling, and they are going to be they're going to be opining on your finalists based on some degree of knowledge, which sometimes is going to be relatively thin. For instance, you might have 3 interviews that are live streamed, and I might watch just one of them. Right? I'm Joe Public. I watch one of them and I'm like, that's the person. I'm going to make sure I fill out my comment card that says that's the person. The great majority of people who will weigh in a public sort of way will have a very thin amount of information to go by. Sure, we'll give them the next superintendent criteria. They may use it, they may not use it, but they will make their decisions based on far less information than the body of knowledge that you're going to have or that a community panel is going to have. So I would say that what are you hearing from the public may or may not actually reflect when you look at the sort of the magnitude of the data, and you'll get lots and lots of data, right? Hundreds and maybe thousands of people in Portland will let you know what they think. But what do you do with that data? Now that data is going to come, one of 2 things is going to happen. There's going to be a large amount of data that says Kristen's the right person. And then you're in a tough spot because your public has said, she's charming, she's magnetic, she's wonderful, she's who we need. You can still pick somebody else at the end of the day, but that's going to make it a lot tougher for you as a board to go against the public that has fallen in love with this candidate. The other thing that can happen is, and this goes down to really bullet point number 4, is let's say the other thing that happens, and often happens, is you've got a whole bunch of public input, and you've got like they fall into different buckets and it's not really clear where your public is. And so what do you do as a human being when you're faced, you've got these 4 finalists or 3 finalists, who do you talk to? You talk to your spouse. You talk to your best friend. They're going to call you if you don't talk to them, right? They're going to say, Herman, I watched the interviews. It's got to be so-and-so. We end up getting input and taking input from the people that we trust most, who are the people that look like us and who are the people that we spend time with. And to really elevate voices of people that are underheard means that we're not making our decisions based upon what our spouse and best friend and closest group of people tell us. But with a large amount of input of hundreds of thousands of voices, you're a human being. Of course you're going to listen. You're going to at least attend to those people that are most close to you. If you were to have, on the other hand, I think we have 3 community panels that we identified in the contract, each of them 12 people that are a microcosm of Portland. So 36 people are going deep into this candidate. They're researching the candidate. They're looking through the application material. They are interviewing the candidate. They're debriefing and debating. And those 36 pieces of data come to you. Well, I would say, that's pretty rich stuff. And it's stuff that's not from your best friend. So it really is about voice of the community. So that's my impassioned argument why, for those 4 reasons. And I'm going to be quiet and listen to the board discuss with yourselves where you want to go with this. There is one item that I want to make sure we talk about before we leave today, which is back to planning for next Tuesday's engagement. So let's, if we can, maybe 5 minutes before 7, just make sure we have a plan for next Tuesday.
Gotcha. So
Yeah, and you don't have to decide this part tonight.
yeah, no, I'm just putting the stuff out here that I feel. I think, transparency builds trust within our community. That's something that we desperately need right now. And I just don't see how we talk about it, but then our actions shows the real truth. If our action is, we're going to be transparent, we want to be open with our community, that builds trust, right? That's when stakeholders and parents, teachers feel they're included in the process, they're more likely to support the final decision that we make because they feel that they're engaged in this education system. Where here in Portland, a lot of people have not felt that way. And if we just continue with the status quo of not doing that, but then saying we're transparent, I think we lose the little amount of trust that we can gain or start gaining by doing that. Also, I think when we have an open search process, it allows for inclusion of diverse perspectives and ideas. I think when we just limit it to 36 people, I don't see how that's a representation of our community. You could have, even if you have 2 Black people to expect, that's not a real, we don't get the whole diaspora of who we are. For instance, Black people, we have different viewpoints, we have different thoughts. So if we're only having, 36 people, we're missing out on thousands and thousands or hundreds of people that could at least have some kind of knowledge of what we're doing. And I think it also makes for better decision making, right? When we're transparent, it fosters better decision making processes. When criteria happen, they're clearly and they're open communicated. Then us as a board, make more informed decisions, and the needs of our parties for our district. And it also has accountability issue, right? Now we're held accountable for the decision we made. We can't just say, well, we made these in behind closed doors decisions. Well, if that's the case and the superintendent comes and sucks, I could be like, well, you know what? I didn't want them in the first place, right? That accountability is not there for us as a board, so people can come and say, hey, you said you liked this dude, and now he sucked, so that's on you. So we avoid accountability where here in Portland, especially PPS, there is a great need of accountability. And so if we don't start at the top with us, then I think we just perpetuate the same stuff that's been going on, which is unaccountability, not really transparent, even though we talk about it. So that's my say. And I won't say nothing.
He's actually paraphrasing because I'm looking at all the stuff that he's got.
I'm trying.
Hey, he is paraphrasing like a king over here because he's got like 3 more pages.
So I want a process that results in the strongest possible candidate pool so we get the strongest possible finalists to get the strongest possible superintendent. And I think we do that by the process that Hank laid out.
And hold on, I just want to say something to that. So-
This isn't, you got to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll mark it down. That's number 5. Number 5 was
I'll
fine.
get a rebuttal because you've had 2 chances.
Gotcha. Don't worry. My bad.
He didn't speak on number 5 or 6.
So I will say that whoever we pick as a superintendent, we absolutely will be accountable. I mean, we sit in a meeting and vote. So there's nobody's going to say like, oh, that was Eddie's candidate because we voted for them. And I mean, we'll be definitely accountable, whatever process we use, because we sit in a public meeting and vote on it, and we vote on contract terms and have agreement on that. So there's full accountability, and I don't think anybody will be able to say it wasn't my choice; it was some other board members. From talking to lots of candidates, it does narrow the pool. So we don't know what candidates we won't see who choose not to be in it for a whole host of reasons. And I mean, one thing that candidates have told me is like, if somebody is the sole support for their family and they're going in and they may not get the job, it's safer just not to apply for it and just to, keep their job, their leadership position they have. I think there is a way, and I think we did this with Guadalupe and also with Vicky, and I think Carol had the same thing, is that when you have a finalist, you can't have more than 36. I mean, they're public. We had community forums. They actually went to the editorial board. I mean, the finalist day was editorial boards. They did a community forum. They did stakeholder tables.
Sorry, Julia, were those publicly?
The community forum, and then people had.
So there was a release of names in this.
Well, the finalists. So I don't know if you remember, but the other finalists pulled out the day.
No, I do remember that. Yeah.
But we had 2 days structured, and their days flipped. It was like they went to the editorial board. They were going to do the roundtables. They did a community forum.
I just wasn't clear because you said that you liked my recommendation, but yours is a different version.
Well, it's
You
what you recommended last time.
You had 2 finalists and you released the names.
And well, we'd already negotiated the contract, so
You had 2 finalists and you released the names.
Yeah, but the thing is that tomorrow morning your name is going to be public. By the end of the day, like, we will have decided, and we've got a negotiated contract.
So you brought 2 people back, but you already had one that.
She wrote
the
contracts
person
with both of them.
dropped out like the night before. So when Guadalupe got here, he thought it was going to be a 2-person public thing, but it wasn't. But we had a community forum, and we had this with Vicky where there was actually 2 people in the community forum. We got immediate feedback. We sat in executive session, spent 2 hours reading through all the community feedback. Then we made a decision. We came back into a public session and we voted on a candidate.
You said with Vicky, right? Okay.
So you didn't release the names with Vicky.
The guarantee was 1 news cycle.
Yeah. And I'm going to speak on that, at least the Vicky stuff, because I don't know about Guadalupe one. I know for a lot of community members, when Vicky was announced, they felt that they were not part of the process. Vicky Phillips, they felt that they was not part of the process. I can go down the list of names of folks who had a problem with that, but I don't think we have to do that here. And so I'm gonna just speak on that piece. When communities don't feel like they are part of the process, they don't feel like they're part of the institution. And if
we had a community process around Vicky, though.
So I think you might want to go talk with the Urban League. I think you want to talk with NAACP about that process.
Well, I'm just
telling you, this is just what they told me. I'm just a messenger.
But there were 2
You're arguing with the wrong
meetings.
person. You're arguing with the wrong person.
Okay,
I'm just telling you what they told me. I'm just a messenger. But I think qualified candidates are more likely to apply for a position when they know that the selection process is fair and transparent. I don't understand why, because something is transparent and fair and open, why would that discourage someone from applying? And if we're talking about, long-term stability, when stakeholders are involved in the selection process, when, people are involved with this process, it creates a stronger foundation for collaboration and continuity in leadership. We had a lot of issues with superintendents as far as stakeholders wanting to be committed to this district. And I don't know if that's, and like I said, I don't know about the whole process, but I think if everybody's involved, just like you're saying, we want the whole board involved in this solution from the beginning to end, why wouldn't we want something different with our community?
I'll just say I watched what happened with Memphis.
And
I thought that
Memphis was great.
It was a disaster.
Oh, absolutely not. I loved how, and actually that was one of the ones I thought was a great example. Memphis I felt had a great thing. Talking to some of the board members that was there, they thought that process was absolutely wonderful. The second part, I don't know about the first part, but the second part where they had transparency, and it was even great for me because you were able to see like their questions and you were able to see how candidates answered the questions. And they had a couple rounds of that. They had community rounds. I thought that was great because the community, their top 3 picks, the community was they liked those top 3 picks. So I thought that was a great way to do something. Absolutely. Now, if you know something different from Memphis than I do, let me know. But
I thought it, because even here, I thought it was very damaging to people's reputation who participated in the process. I mean, you had on, social media, people like picking apart the candidates that went on so long.
Have you talked to any of the candidates?
Pardon?
Have you talked to any of the candidates about their experience?
No, I saw it was written about a lot of candidates.
You should talk to the candidates.
Is it okay I want to hear from Michelle, because I know she might.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
And then I have something to add to after.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, this is a fascinating discussion. I was watching, of course, the Memphis Shelby discussion and process really closely. I have not talked in depth with the other candidates that did not get picked, but this idea about like the pool of people that we will get. And Julie, I appreciate you brought up, what if it's a superintendent is the sole provider having to be vulnerable and maybe not getting the job and applying. I mean, what a perfect scenario. But I do feel like we should keep it. First of all, I want to keep it to what our consultants think is the best process for the first tranche. And for the second tranche, yeah, maybe we do have a bit of confidentiality around it. I feel like Portlanders are really engaged and are going to want to be involved in every discussion. And also just want to share that I was part of that the community could be invited in for the final interviews in a way that they understand that they don't have a decision, but that they're listening in and they're invited in. And I was part of a Department of Transportation directorship where the final 3 candidates had community forums. Community was invited to witness their statements and what they thought they'd bring, but didn't have any decision making. And so that's a way of bringing people in that, especially, say from the Black community. And Gary, thank you for saying that all Black people don't think alike. I really appreciate that. That it is so true. But unless you're part of the group, you don't know that. But I feel like there's a way to kind of do a hybrid between being transparent at certain points in the process and also keeping it, we want to get the widest pool as possible. We want to get the best candidates. We want to attract the best candidates. And if maintaining confidentiality, at least until they've had a first interview, is the thing that gets us there, I would advocate for that. And then we talk about being transparent once we have a solid 3 candidates, because I think if you're one of 3 finalists, you understand that there will be a public process and that your name will be floated. And also agree with Julie about the Memphis. It was, according to Memphis board members, it was really messy, and that's why it took so long. It took months. The process wasn't well defined. They outed people really early, and it was a mess. And I'd like us to not do that.
Yeah, this Memphis thing sounds exciting.
It was.
I missed it.
Not if you were a candidate.
Yeah.
Well, not if you're a candidate, and you should do a Google search for Memphis Shelby, and see what comes up.
This reminds me a lot because I did a lot of work in social media too. A lot of the debate around like representative versus direct democracy. Because, you know, one of the principles of representative democracy is that you vote for a group of people who represent and can become experts in the decision-making process instead of, you know, having direct democracy, which, you know, had a lot of social experiments that failed. And one of the nightmare scenarios I'm worried about is that, you know, sometimes you have situations where someone interviews wonderfully, may not be qualified, right? May have the wrong qualifications. They just may be very charming and very, you know, just be very good at becoming popular. And oftentimes you need to pick the ones that are also qualified and have the skill set to do the job. And I'm worrying about a nightmare scenario where it could create a rift between the public and the board in the fact that, like, maybe the popular one is not the one we select for exactly those reasons. And that's, you know, that would be a nightmare scenario that would create even more distrust with the board. So I can kind of see both ways, and I really appreciate this discussion. I think this is very valuable. But I just want to add my piece that this is very a perfect example of all the debate around representative democracy. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
My last thoughts quick, because I know we're trying to get out, is I thought we were talking about the last 3 that once we got down to the last 3, we would announce, not everything up before. And I just made this comment, and I think this was back when Julia was talking about them doing the walk around to go meet everybody. And my thought was, when she was saying that, by that time, did they really care? Because they had already essentially had the job, and a contract had been negotiated, and they were going around shaking hands and kissing babies. So to me, that's more of a political, I need to smile, I need to do my dance, because, you know, these are people that I'm going to be working with, versus if I don't do this right, I don't get it. And so and so I'm thinking that was around when you were saying that I would make a mistake.
Actually,
Frankie's up.
you always have to be willing to fail the search. I mean, this is what we talked about a little bit that morning. It's like, okay, you're the sole finalist. You thought there were going to be 2. You're the sole finalist. You're going to meet all these people today. We've already negotiated a contract. But certainly I don't think we would say, like, no matter what happens today, we're still hiring you. That was not the deal. I mean, very much the board was like, this is like your interview with the community.
So what would have, I guess, I'm gonna go to Frankie right after this, but what would have made the board at that decision change their mind after doing all the negotiations, all the stuff? What would have to happen for the board to change their mind at that point?
Like they make a major error.
Like what?
Major.
Like I'm just trying to get
We didn't
under.
make one, so.
Well, I'm just trying to say that what would
Because
have that.
we've done so much due diligence.
Right. So I'm saying, so at that point, if he's already the sole finalist, what would have to happen? Because you said it wasn't guaranteed. What would have to happen?
Here's an example. Prior to the search, prior to that, there was a sole candidate, and actually the board members went down to Atlanta and toured around the school. It was all very public. It was all over the media. And then because they didn't do the full background check before all that, stuff came out. And even though he was the sole finalist and everybody expected him to be hired, he was not hired because something came out from the background check that led them to not hire him.
Okay, I'm gonna get to Frankie because she's had her hand up, and we got like, yeah. Go ahead, Frankie.
I'm still gathering my thoughts on this, I would say, but it is making me think of that statistic. I think it's something like men will apply for a job when they meet only 60% of qualifications, and then women apply only when they meet 100% of them. And I do think that, like, kind of thinking of it as a barrier to application is one thing I'm considering, and it brought that up for me just because I feel like confidentiality wise, like, people oftentimes want to apply for things and they already have something, and like if it was me applying, I would be worried. So like if you're a woman who's already in a leadership position, I just kind of view this as potentially being one more barrier.
strong point right there.
For real.
Yeah.
See, this is why we have a student on our team, because she makes us all look dumb. Thank you, Frankie.
Yes, Frankie, that is so true. I appreciate it.
No, first of all, I love the discussions. Thank you, everybody, for doing it. And I will say, what I love about it is that I actually came into it pretty opposed to the idea of releasing names for all the reasons that you mentioned. I think this is really good reasons on your slide. But your passion around sort of releasing the names is also, it's giving me pause. And I guess and I'll just say a couple of things. And I know, Hank, we probably shouldn't be saying this in public, but I don't think it's going to surprise anybody. What also matters to me is, we're not in a particularly strong position right now to be recruiting a superintendent, right? Coming out of a strike, dealing with the budget cuts we're dealing with. So there's a dynamic in a recruitment, any recruitment you do, right? You sort of start off, you're like, prove to me you want to be here. But then pretty quickly when you narrow it down, it's like, let me convince you why you want to be here. And I think in this recruitment, we just need to be realistic. There's going to be a lot of convincing, right? So there's, we want someone. I agree with you, Gary. We want someone who desperately wants to be here, but we also are going to need to be really selling all the positives, of which there are many, right? But those might not be positives that they read about right away when we work in public schools. And so that's a factor. And I mean, Julia said it right. We want the best superintendent. And I think we would all agree that if a closed process got us a superior superintendent, we would go with the closed process. And if we all knew with hindsight that an open process got a better superintendent, we would all agree on that. What we're doing here is playing it's a game theory, right? Like which one of these processes will bring us the best person? And I'm wondering if there's not, Julia engaged in a process where they're going to release 2 names. Is there a huge difference between 2 and 3? You talked about releasing, the 5 or 6. But maybe there's maybe what we say here is when you become an absolute finalist and we are down to that, that's the point when we make it public. And I don't want to make a decision tonight because I actually want to think about it personally.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But I'm wondering if there's a middle ground we could get to that sort of meets it. And I want to be clear, you're right about our community. If we do a closed process, they will attack us. And that will hurt the superintendent getting started no matter who we pick. We have to balance that against who we may lose, right? So, how do you, that's a tough.
And I think if you end up going with the public process too, you have to be fully committed that if you don't bring anybody unless they're a viable contender forward. So if that means you get down to 3 people and you go, there's really only one, that you don't be disingenuous to candidates. And because when you get down to as a board, there's really only one. These other 2, they may fall in love with. And you already know they aren't people you can live with. So if you decide any bit of public, it could even be that you only bring 1. Because if it wasn't that one, you're going to go back out anyway. So it's kind of hard to play it all out to the end of how many, because you also don't know the quality of the candidates. And I wouldn't bring somebody back that's
I hope you guys will make sure you bring quality candidates.
Right.
Okay.
Sure.
We got Hank wanted to talk to some stuff.
Yeah.
Talk
Okay.
about some stuff, and we can talk
Tell me
about.
all my stuff. So I need the working group that's going to work with me to line out the engagement, and then we also need to know if the March date we tentatively have on our calendars works to come
Let's
back
take
with
them one
this.
at a time.
Yeah.
Let's
Okay,
take
let's
the
go
first one.
March.
It's February 27th. Is there?
So who is going to work with me on February 27th?
So I would love for, and this is just a thought, I would love for Eddie and Patty to be involved if you want to do that with that process.
Yeah.
Are there any objections from anyone?
Well, that was a voluntold.
I would also like to do.
Watch out. Julie's trying to start something. Julie's trying to
And one
start
of the reasons
something.
why I said that is because they're new. Their terms is going to be longer, and they coming from that teacher's perspective that I don't have. So that's why I was thinking about them too when you brought up that engagement piece, as far as engagement piece.
Oh, and
If somebody else want to be on as
totally,
well.
totally
I would-
not related.
Chair?
Sorry, Pat.
Yeah.
I have, no, what are you volunteering me for, Gary?
This is why you need to be here. No.
Here, to
No,
be here on,
They want some folks to help them put together the engagement process.
the engagement, you mean we engage, each of us engaging with the,
No, we explain it.
Sure. So Christy is taking the lead. Christy and Steve are taking the lead on designing the focus groups. Who
okay, all right.
basically it's about getting a list of the groups and the individuals that would be participating in that work.
Okay.
Chair to pass? I mean,
Yes,
Director
thank you.
to pass?
Chair. No, you're the chair. I was just like, chair. I would also like to participate in that because I've been doing this for a long time.
All right, done. You don't even need to
Make
explain.
sure, I'll make sure that we get everybody involved.
Oh, so we have our three.
So,
Andrea has something.
Do you need your slide?
yeah, Roseanne and I will work tomorrow to figure out how we're gonna do that next Tuesday. So we'll do that offline.
Okay.
Okay, so,
Sorry, around engagement, I meant to say it earlier. I just, I want to make sure labor, I would prefer
Yes.
that labor has a say, whether that's on some of the final panels or actually in both. I think in terms of making sure we've explicitly reached out on the superintendent criteria.
yeah.
And then later.
I think
Yeah.
labor
You say
has
has a say, you mean has an input or,
It's same thing.
okay.
labor.
Director Scott, should we invite a llama to participate?
Oh, wait. Dig. Oh, dig.
Too soon.
Dig. I love the fact that you waited, though. I was trying to figure out when a good time to talk about the llama. I'm glad that you opened it up to come.
You know,
Open that door.
All right.
you can't not acknowledge the llama.
Hold on. So May 5th, we have a board meeting.
Are we live?
That is my favorite moment ever. I know.
All right. So I think there's a committee of three. Yes, that's going to work with Christy and Steve.
Correct.
Patty, Eddie, and
Director Long, Director to pass, Director Silver, yeah.
And board members, just a reminder of the homework Christy gave you earlier, which is if you are going through and we'd like you to think about individuals or groups that should be represented, please email that to Roseanne by Monday so that you'll be compiling that and then sharing it with the committee and with, okay, so that's.
These are community members to be involved. Is that what you said?
It could be community members, it could be labor, it could be whatever you think, because it's staff, it's students, it's parents, it's community members, it's family.
Maybe like a community group.
Yeah.
Or group.
And their
The urban
work
league
is
might be a
to,
group you wanna have a.
right.
I guess what I'm kind of thinking about that is like if we have an organization, they can submit a person to come to that.
Oftentimes
Yeah,
it's
they can-
that.
okay.
Oftentimes it's that, and then
Gotcha.
usually it's that.
Okay.
Sometimes there might be an organization where you want 5 or 6 members, but more often it's exactly what you just said.
Don't we have a list from last time
I
also?
have a list from last time. If you want to see just an idea of what it was, like.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you can share that
Yeah, you
with
can
the
just
board
send that
and
It was exhaustive.
so that way we're
Yeah.
not duplicating the
40
same
groups this
stuff.
time.
Yeah.
The other,
March 5th,
can we get a
we have a
2-hour
board
block?
meeting, on March 5th.
Okay, I thought so. I must have misunderstood. So
So
March 5th wouldn't work for
No.
we've got about 2 hours more of work to do in terms of planning and design, in terms of also resolving some of these questions, and then there's a few agenda items. we
What
haven't
about
even hit
next,
yet.
what about the 27th? So we have an open hold on the 27th.
Um,
27th when we've got this meeting, right? The focus group meeting.
I would like it very much to be the following week so that I can be present.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll get with Roseanne so she can,
Do we have time between 5 and 6 on the 5th?
Yes.
So it's only an hour.
well, you said 2 hours.
I think an hour will be too short, honestly. So if we could get a 2-hour block somewhere else that week, that would probably be better. If we can't, then
That's what I said, maybe talk with Roseanne and she can maybe put out a thing for anyone during that, during the rest of that week, if that's okay for anyone.
okay.
So I'll just have, Roseanne, we'll have you try to coordinate with us as far as any time, either the 6th, 7th, 8th.
Is the 4th option too, since you've got some people already here for policy committee?
Are you asking me or?
I'm
the
asking
board?
the board members. But
Fourth
if it doesn't work for you, Hank, that
Or
would.
the 4th. Could the 4th work for you?
Till
Monday.
committee meeting till 6.
We can make it
So
work.
maybe do something like from 4 to 6?
How about Wednesday the 6th? That work?
Maybe 4:15 to 5:45.
So can we get Roseanne to try to check between the 4th and the 6th, and then we try to see if we can get those dates for everybody.
Because he needs 2 hours.
Yeah, he needs 2 hours. Is that okay with everybody? The 4th and the 6th?
Could we do it after, we do it on the 4th after the policy committee?
4th would be much better for me.
I prefer the 4th.
I can do the 4th after the policy committee. Particularly if you ended a little early.
What time is it about?
From 4 to 6.
So you'll go 6 to 8?
So ended at 5:30.
Oh, yeah.
Julia, can you shorten your meeting to 5:30 and then we'll 5:30?
Sorry, I wasn't
The
paying attention.
On the
fourth,
fourth,
the
on the
fourth.
fourth, can policy committee, can we figure out a way to make it end at 5:30 and then go 2 hours after that?
Just a minute, let me know.
I'll say an amen to ending it, that policy committee early. Yes. Not fast.
Now we going to church on them.
Don't jinx it.
You know what the young kids are doing? They're talking at 1.5 times the speed. So let's just get through that policy committee meeting and early. Yes.
When I listen to my audiobooks, I got him at 1.75.
Yeah.
Well, okay,
That's
if you
what all
guys
the
just
kids are
put
doing.
out whatever I put on the table, then we should be fine.
I'm good with it.
I've got the
That was
priest
easy
coming for
enough for
dinner,
me.
guys.
That's all I had to do. That means a 5-minute meeting.
Okay,
So it's not like it's gonna be Monday.
4 to 5:30?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that,
so
I mean, it
5
works, as long as it works for Michelle and
I'll get here.
Eddie.
So you
Yeah.
wanna do about from 5:45 to 7:45? You at least get,
On Monday, on the 4th?
yeah, on the 4th.
Yeah, that would work.
It doesn't
Awesome.
work for me, guys.
Okay, good job.
See, look at we can just
So
like
look at that.
work together to get stuff done.
Hey,
Speaking.
Patty is talking. It does not work for me.
Oh,
Let's
See?
figure something out. But just so you know,
The 4th did
But-
not work for you?
no, not unless it's in the afternoon.
Well, yeah, it's from 6:30 or 5:45 to 7:45.
Yeah, but we have the priest coming for dinner. I mean, we could cancel it.
Oh yeah, you can't.
Oh, no, don't cancel the
That's why I
priest.
love priest
You
meat
can't
that
not
night.
eat with the priest.
Oh,
Yeah, you
Don't
can't do
cancel the
that.
priest. They don't get a home cooked meal that often, so.
No, they don't, but
No, they don't.
we could, well, actually, they do all the time, but
Everybody-
They eat out every
Everybody,
night.
bro, I'm finna start. I'm changing my whole thing now.
yeah, you could change.
That's
So
what
it.
do we
you
want,
preached.
do we want to try and look for a different day?
I mean, let me go talk to my husband. Maybe I can change it. It's only been-
Okay, well, hold on. Right now,
He's gonna do it right now.
Everybody in one place.
What?
Okay,
She got up. She got up.
okay, this
This is the kind of stuff I'm talking about.
The thing is,
classic.
the priest is a big deal. It's not,
She
it's
said,
not a
"Let
big
me
deal for
go,"
the
and
priest.
left. I love
What'd you
that.
say, Michelle?
It's not a good deal. It's not a big deal for the priest. It's a big deal for the people hosting the priest.
Oh,
Like,
gotcha.
they don't
I
come to your
love
house that
that. She
often.
said, "Let me go check," and left.
Yeah, so,
And
yeah.
left.
I love it. I love
Okay,
it. I'll just-
all right, this will be the 4th change, but we'll change it.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, so it's gonna be 4:30, 5:30.
So we're gonna, it's,
Time.
yeah, the 5:45 to 7:45.
5:45.
She probably got an old planner too.
Generous.
Yep.
She right.
She writing it in the plan.
I do, I'm still got to
I
pay.
love it.
Nobody telling me nothing about Patty. Y'all got me messed up.
That's why I love Patty.
You gotta love that paper, that
Another
paper.
era.
All right. Is there anything else we need to talk about?
Thank you.
All
Board.
right.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you, guys. See you soon.
See you guys next
Have
week.
a good night.
Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.